Welcome to selfdiscoveryradio.com, where the orchard of wisdom is just ready for picking. We celebrate your why, the journey that you've taken that inspires someone else. We support your services, we support your story. Come and be our guest, become a host, be an author with us. Come and see what we've got. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Ignite Your Heart and Soul. I'm your host, Sara Troy, and my guests today, double whammy. I have got Reverend Charles Edwardus, and I also have Ainsworth Ferendi, who both have been back on the show here before, departing their wonderful wisdom and love and knowledge and passion for humanity. They both are people of Gus, God, Universe, Spirit. You're going to hear us gussing a lot here. And they're both givers. Most certainly givers and igniters of people's hearts and souls. And we're going to be talking today about that very hot subject. What is the truth about spirituality versus religion? And they've both served as Charles is a reverend, church, has a church, the congregation already. Ainsworth started his life off that way, was one of the youngest pastors ever to be around until he redirected himself into the truth. And so it's going to be a very interesting, juicy topic today. This is not religious bashing or spiritual bashing. It's just some truths coming from us as we see it. So it's all about that perspective that we see, things that we're sharing with you. And of course, you can come back on our comments and share with us as well, because we would like to have an enlightened conversation with you. But I'm going to read what each one of us has just contributed as a little opinion here, and then we're going to get right into the show. So Charles says, faith or religion? The challenge with words is that the meaning of the words are fluid and change over time, and even change in the present moment from person to person. Faith, for me, is more about deeply inter-abiding intimacy with Gus, God, Universe, Spirit. Religion, on the other hand, is an institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices that one must maintain a scrupulous conformity to, and this is the only way to know the experience and interact with God. I say, living in a spiritual divine energy, you know that you are of God, Gus, God, Universe, and Spirit. When Gus is in you, guiding you, your path is clear to one's purpose. You are in knowingness without a doubt. You're in harmony with your soul. This is, for me, the divine connection that will always be there for me, never letting me down, always showing me the way forward. As yet, I have not found a religion that connects me in such a way. And Ainsworth says, for me, it is a question about moving beyond faith and operating in knowledge. And the key is in escaping to the matrix. So we have some very interesting perspectives there from everyone. And I'd like to introduce you to Charles and to Ainsworth. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, good day.
Hello, hello. I'm excited to be here with Ainsworth. I've
Yes.
heard Ainsworth before on your program, and yeah, this is great. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and Ainsworth is a great supporter. We follow each other all the time, and it was a very, very enlightening conversation that I had with him. Please go back and listen to it, as please go back and listen to the shows with Charles. There's nuggets of information there and enlightenment that is wonderful. But I want both of you just to give a little background platform for people who may be newly listening to you, and just tell people a little about you. I'll start with you, Ainsworth.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the fact was I began my search quite early. As a matter of fact, I began my search, I think, somewhere around 12, or could be younger. That began when my mother presented me with a Bible and told me, study this. And that was my first Bible, and I delved into that. I really went into it. And I devoted so much time in studying the Bible that my schoolwork was actually affected very negatively. So the thing was that eventually I made a decision, felt that I was being guided, and I think I was, to my denomination, which was the Church of Christ at the time, which was perfect for me. And it prepared me for where I am today, because one of the things they taught you and they emphasized on was letting scripture interpret itself and not going by emotion. If I had maybe become a Pentecostal, I don't think that I would have been where I am today, because it's all about emotion, and nobody checks anything. They don't check to see if this can be validated. Once the preacher says it and it sounds good, that's basically how it goes. And so, that began my journey. But, the thing is that I've realized that we talk about having free, what's it called? The words just slipped me here. Basically, the will to choose.
Yes.
And we may have to some extent, but I think a lot of it is preordained for us. I think we chose the path that we're supposed to walk before we came here. And so everything is directed to guiding you towards walking that unique path that you chose to walk. And so I had a series of experiences which led me to eventually to begin doing research. And my research, after many thousands of hours of researching, got me to the point where I realized that everything that I had believed was not what I had thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
I had built my foundation upon sand, not on the rock, as I thought I had. And that was quite a painful time for me. As a matter of fact, it was so painful that I literally had to stop studying. And, because if I had not, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown. Simply because everything I thought was real was not. And so my whole reality was just turned right side up. And, that's basically where I went. So it took me a while before I really began to study again. And for me, I'm continuously evolving, continuously learning. New information is constantly being given to me, stuff that a few months or years ago I would have said, oh no, not really, but I'm constantly downloading a whole lot of stuff, and so it's an interesting journey. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
It's an interesting journey, and what I'm aware of is that there seems to be quite an awakening, because like Charles, like myself, there's so many other pastors every day. You're seeing somebody else popping up who no longer believes the Christian faith because he's found out that that what he believed isn't correct. And so this may have to do with the fact that we've now entered into the age of Aquarius.
Yes.
And so it's the age of enlightenment. And could very well be what the Mayan prophecy was relating to when the world went crazy and thought that the world was about to end. And what they were actually speaking about, like the Bible speaks about, was actually the end of an age,
Yes.
not the end of the world.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that age is over, and I think we've come to the place where the avatar, that is the Jesus figure, and to some extent Muhammad as well, I think their road has come to an end, or is coming to an end.
Yes, I agree with you that. Charles, please give a little bit of your background and even some response to what Ainsworth has to say there.
Yeah, well, like Ainsworth, very young, I was raised Roman Catholic, and, as Latino, you're either Pentecostal or Roman Catholic, right? So, and I remember taking one of my granddad's old smoking stands. My granddad was a pipe smoker, and would take I made up my little altar and everything, and some of Grandma's old curtains, and I made vestments out of it, and I was really into it, and everybody knew I was going to be the priest of the family. And I also was a questioner. I've always questioned things, and pre-Vatican II, of course, you don't ask questions. You just you don't read the Bible. You have any questions, you ask the nuns or the priest, and you keep those strict rubrics. And there were some things going on with my mom and my dad that were unfortunate, that ended up in my mother and father divorcing and everything. And there were some, they tried to excommunicate my mother from the church, and she just wasn't going for it, continued to go to church, continued to go to communion, even when they told her she couldn't. And she says, well, you can't tell me what I can't do. I can walk in that church. I can walk down the aisle. I can receive communion. Now you can refuse to give it to me. But anyway, the long and short of it is, went to Catholic school for a while. And I reached that point where I was just totally turned off to Christianity, particularly. And then through, I think I had mentioned to you back in 1971, I was shot and killed, died on the operating table, and going through that whole experience of dying on the operating table, being told that I would never be able to talk again, the whole experience that I had in that period where they said I was dead, kind of, I guess that was Gus's way of saying, listen, it's time for you to get the real deal. Mm-hmm. So, but
the true awakening.
Yeah, but and it led me back to, which is kind of normal. We tend to return to what we know, and being raised Christian, that was I returned to look at Christianity, but I also turned to Buddhism. I turned to I was curious about Islam. Again, I was a questioner. I asked questions. So I was looking at everything, because I said in my heart, I knew Gus's truth is not limited to one particular religion or denomination. The truth of God, universe, spirit is transcendent. So, and even now it's interesting, because I rail somewhat about institutionalized religion, but yet I am a part of institutionalized religion, but really an outlier, and I dare I say, not much unlike Christ, who basically was within his system, but at the same time was saying, this ain't it. There is so much more than this, and there is an esoteric Christianity, a mystical Christianity that the world is being reawakened to, but it's still a minority of people that are even connecting at that level. And those who are Christians that are connecting at the esoteric level have an appreciation and are able to embrace Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam. They are able to embrace Vedanta. They are able to embrace Buddhism, and there's no threat. But part of the issue with religion is this drive to conformity. You have to be like I am. You have to know and understand. We all have to know and understand in exactly the same way. And that's just a big crock of bovine excrement. That's crazy. That doesn't even begin to make sense.
Right.
So anyway, yeah,
We're not meant
and
to be boxed, are we? We're not
no,
meant
no,
to be.
not
I mean, as
not at all.
humanity, how do we create? How do we explore? How do we become? How do we elevate? You know,
Exactly.
if we're so contained, and if you
Yes.
contain people and repress them, at some point they're going to outgrow that box you've put
Right.
them in,
Right.
and they're going to burst from it, and
Right.
maybe burst from it in anger or in rebellion. When really we want people just to know their own wings and expand and fly and see what the possibilities are. But we're not going to
Exactly.
see that if everything is, I think when hell came into it, you will go to hell if you don't,
Yeah. Right.
and started the fear of God.
Yeah.
God is
Right.
not fearful. That was
No.
not
No.
his message at
Right.
all.
Right. Well, exactly. Exactly right.
Well, the thing is, if I can interject here,
Yes, go ahead.
is that fear is an instrument of control.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm looking to control you, like if the husband, for example, is looking to control his wife, he uses fear as the instrument of control. If the
Sure.
wife is looking to control her husband, she uses fear. Fear that if you don't comply, I would leave, or fear that if you don't comply, I'll get me another man or something. Fear is basically an instrument of control.
Yes.
So whenever there's fear, there is liberty has ceased to exist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fear is also, and let me put it this way, it's one of the layers of control that's used to keep you in the matrix.
Yep.
The Bible talks about the fact that once we enter this plane, we have entered into the matrix. A lot of people aren't aware of that. But so once we've come in here, we've entered into the matrix. And the matrix is basically different layers, layer upon layer of control mechanisms that are designed to keep you from discovering who you really are.
Yeah.
One of the key instruments used in that is fear.
Mm-hmm.
And religion is adept at using fear as a control mechanism. So that's where the whole concept of hell came in, because hell is the place of fear. So if you don't conform to God's will, then that's where you're going to go. But the same Bible that talks about hell also tells you that perfect love casts out fear,
Fear. Yeah.
because with perfect love, there is no fear of retribution.
Right.
Paraphrasing. Okay? So if God is perfect love, or if the essence or the universe, the main energy in the universe is perfect love, then there is nothing to fear.
Right.
Yes. Yes. I mean, fear is, I think, an instinctual thing, obviously, because of form of danger.
Right.
Against attack or against famine. There's a natural purpose for fear, because that is an awareness to protect yourself against elements or things happening to you. But this fear state of living, which I think what the church does is put everybody in a fear state of living. They live from fear.
Yeah.
Fear of,
Right.
fear of going to hell, or fear of letting the church down, fear of being ostracized, fear of this. And we have a complete society around the world today that completely and utterly are paralyzed by fear on every level of their lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we see it in government and everything. It's all about, what was it Jean-Paul Sartre said, fear is the others. And in our society, we are always we're sorting, the others, the black people, the white people, the Brits, the French, the Germans, the Dutch, it's always the others. And that's what I say, there's only one race on the planet, and that is the human race. And ultimately, we are not even this physicality.
Right.
People ask you, who are you? I say, well, I am a spiritual being living out a physical human existence. But what you see is not, this is my earth suit. You can't go to outer space without having a space suit. When you live on the earth, you got to have an earth suit, which is known as a body. And so we wear these earth suits in order to navigate through this. But then there are times in my lucid dreams, I'll go different places without that earth suit.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
earth suit laying in the bed snoozing. But
Exactly.
my consciousness is elsewhere. So it is, and this is, as Ainsworth pointed out, this is a time and a season of awakening to the authentic identity of who we are, which is for a lot of people bizarre. That's what we're talking about. There are folks that look at me, and a couple of them, I think, were working a plan to get me committed because they thought I had totally lost all of my marbles. But and that's okay, you know.
Yes, the thing about the vessel, when we actually look at all the cars on the road that drive everybody around, and they're very complex, we do not know how they work. We just get into them and work them, and off we go. And everybody has a different preference of car, but we don't seem to criticize the cars for being different. So I don't understand why we criticize ourselves for being a different color, a different shape, a different size,
Right.
you know, or different make. You know, it seems to be that we've got an obsession with, like, everything has to be the same, and conformity, and you know, little droids, and that is not what this human experience is about. And it is about that liberty and freedom to explore our spirit in this body on this beautiful earth, and what we can do to make it even better. But Ainsworth, you were wanting to comment, Charles, there on that point.
Yeah, I was asking if he had read Plato's allegory of the cave.
Oh my God, yeah, years ago. Yes, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, in Plato's The Cave, you have these people basically,
Right.
who are kept in chains with their neck and their feet bound, and they can't turn to the right or the left or to the back of them. They basically are just facing one direction.
Right.
And you have people that are passing on the wall, and the light from the outside is putting a shadow on the wall. So all they can see are the shadows passing by. And they hear the voices of the people, and they assume that it's the shadows talking. And, you know, so that's all they've known all their life. They've never been outside. They've never seen anything but the shadows.
Yes.
And finally, one person is removed forcefully from the cave after much rebellion, and he gets outside, and he's blinded by the light, you know, because it's the first time that his eyes have seen sunlight.
Right.
And then in the moon, you know, in the night, it's the moonlight, so his eyes get adjusted, and he's beginning to see once more. And suddenly he begins to realize all that he was missing while he was in the cave, all that, you know, that he couldn't see while he was in the cave.
Right.
And he then goes back to tell the people, you know, in the cave, you know, about the liberty that he's now able to enjoy. But because he can't see,
right,
having come out of the light into the cave,
right,
they see, look what the light has done to him.
right.
You know, he can't even see the shadows that are on the wall anymore because the light has blinded him. And so therefore, no, you know, anybody that comes and tries to get us out of this cave, we're going to kill them, basically.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the situation, you know, that I realize that a lot of us are in that you go out into a measure of light. Because the thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, the matrix is filled with layers, so that we may break one layer So we may break one layer, but that doesn't mean that we've escaped the matrix, because there are other layers that we have not yet escaped. And what you will find is that most people have their point of, that's it. I'm trying to find a word that best describes it. Anyways, a point beyond which they're not prepared to go.
Right.
So people will say, yeah, I'm looking for truth. Yes, I want truth. But once you get to a particular point, you say, no, I'm not prepared to go there.
Well, it's a conditional truth.
Yes.
I only want it as long as I can remain within my comfort zone to be challenged. But the one thing for the people that are, dare I say, for lack of a better terminology, those who are destined to be awakened, and I follow you with, and I kind of liken what you were languaging as the levels within the matrix, as the levels of consciousness going from the very basic and mythic levels of consciousness all the way up to non-dual awareness. You have, once you make that first break, it does expand your belief in, expectation of. I loved what you were talking about, the whole thing of moving into knowledge, gnosis in the Greek. And part of, again, the problem with language is the limitation of language and the meanings within language, because knowledge to Ainsworth and to Charles may mean something very akin, but knowledge to another person wouldn't be what you and I may talk about insofar as what knowledge.
Gobbledygook to a lot of people. That's the problem, right?
Well, exactly right.
And the thing is about perspective.
Exactly.
You know, when you're looking at knowledge, you guys are studious people. You seek the knowledge so that you can understand what your role is here to do. You were talking about coming, out of the dark into the light and being blinded. I spent many years actually in the dark, being disconnected from my soul and my heart. But there was a speck of light in there, and I knew I had to go into that at one time. But I was becoming comfortable in the dark. And then as I started coming out into the light, yes, it does blind you. And it's hard to get used to. And what I felt for a long time is that there were constant shadows chasing me.
Yes.
And, don't turn around, the shadows will pull you back into the dark. As I went into the light and allowed the light to immerse itself in me, and for me to see my own light within myself, I can now happily go into the dark, because I am the light in the dark.
I am the light. Say that again. I am the light
in the dark. So I'm no longer afraid of the dark.
Yes.
And this thing is pushing ourselves through our fear. You come out and you feel blinded. You just got to adjust. That's the thing, we have to allow ourselves process. For you, Ainsworth, when you discovered that everything that you'd been told was, hang on, this ain't the truth. Does that mean my life is a lie? No, it just means what you were told was a lie, was a mistruth. But it sent you on an exploration of what is the truth. For you, Charles, is that Catholicism, rigid, very strict, very linear. And for you, that didn't fit, that coat didn't fit because you were too exploratory. But no, what does this mean outside of the box? There must be more. And I think this is a key thread that we need to ask people to do. Please be explorers. Please do not just accept knowledge at face value. Even what we're saying today, this is coming from our own experiences. But go and read, go and listen, go and talk to other people and explore yourself. I think a word here that comes into play a lot is complacency. Oh, well, it's just what the church told me. I've got to comply. And it's, no, you don't. You don't.
And that's part of the application, as Ainsworth was pointing out, of the fear, because if you are to question or go anywhere outside of the lines, if you are to cross certain boundaries, there are going to be consequences and everything. Whereas in my particular case, I ain't care, that just means another adventure. Let's see what happens when I go outside the lines. But, And I love you know, as Ainsworth is shared, we all share in metaphors, and actually from the scientific, from the science side of it, the way we have been fearfully and wonderfully made is our mind connects with metaphors. So we look at the metaphor of the matrix. We look at some of the, if you will go back and look at some of the metaphor, Plato's metaphor with the cave and everything. The hero's journey. There are all of these things speak to different archetypes and everything, and those carry the meanings for us. And whereas, again, it may carry the same metaphor, may carry a particular meaning for you, Sara, another meaning for Ainsworth,
Yes.
another meaning for me, but ultimately the truth within it will all overlap and come together as we open our hearts and minds to that truth, and we're able to say, ah, I see what you're saying, and this has been my experience of that same identical truth.
And it is the truth to us, isn't it, Ainsworth and Charles, is that, you know, when we understand that, we have to understand too that there are different perspectives, different point of views coming from our 4 different or 5 different personality types. And that you see things this way, I see things this way. When we put them together, we realize what we're seeing is the same thing. We just articulate it in a different way as what it means to us.
Yes. Our relation, and here's a perfect example, and I think I might have shared this with you before. I know I shared it here recently with somebody. I had 4 siblings. My baby brother, youngest brother, died at birth. My younger brother, right next to me, he died from a heart attack about 9 months after Mom passed. But there were a total of 5 of us. I'm firstborn. We all had the same mother, but each one of us knew little Olive in a different way. And it's so amazing to me when I sit with my sisters now. We'll talk about a particular incident that happened with us as kids and everything, and there is a different perspective from each one of us, but yet we come together in a harmony that people say, man, it's just amazing. I love to watch your family in action. You guys just love each other. And even in those points where we're disagreeing, no, it didn't happen that way, you know. But again, and I think it was Ainsworth who pointed out, difference of perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it different.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember in our interview, Ainsworth, you know, you were talking about how you had a conversation with somebody that kind of changed things for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, the people that come across in your life at that pivotal time, and it's like you're at the crossroads. Where do you go from now? You know, from here. And it's like, what is the truth? You know, what do I need to know? And then along comes somebody in your life who shares a perspective, and then suddenly, aha, a connection. Can you tell us a little more about that, Ainsworth?
Okay. I'm actually thinking about something, Sara, and I don't know if you can.
Go with your thought. Go with your thought.
The thing is that what I've come to realize is that I was talking about the fact that basically we all have our limits to truth. So, you know, we will go thus far and no more. Most of us do. Okay? But in order to totally escape the matrix, we've got to get to the point where we have no limits, where we're open to all truth. And the people that need to come into our space will come into our space because they're reflections of our consciousness, where we are at the moment. And so whatever our consciousness is at that time, we will attract that energy into our life to help us move on to the other level. And the thing about it is that why that is so important is because religion and the programming in religion is rather insidious to the point where we don't recognize that even though we're no longer in a particular religion, that its very concepts still control a large extent of our thinking. So it controls lots of times how we view ourselves. It controls how we view the world. It controls how we view other people. You know, there was this big issue recently about homosexuality in my own country. I'll just let that pass and then we can get back to it. Okay. Are you hearing the car?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, good. All right. I thought you might have been hearing it. Anyway, there was this whole issue of homosexuality in my country. And the thing was that people who were even friends with me, I did mention the fact that, listen, are you aware that many people are born that way?
Yeah.
That there's nothing that they can do about it? That even at birth, the doctors have said, you know, well, we don't know what sex they are. And what they used to do many times before was they would attribute the sex to them. And then when they grew up, the person would say, you know, but I don't feel connected to that.
Yeah.
That's sexuality.
Right.
And so therefore they would seek a change, or they just live out their lives in misery. But now what they're doing is actually waiting until the person reaches a particular age where they can decide what sex they want to be, and then doing the necessary. But a lot of people have a problem with that. Even people who said, okay, I'm no longer, you know, caught in the trap of religion, had a problem with that. Because what they don't realize is that their mind, they've been programmed to see this issue a particular way. So even if they are not attending church and not following the rituals of the church, the programming still works. It doesn't stop working.
And the problem with that, Ainsworth, is that part that comes from religion in that particular and specific instance that you're sharing is what going to the Christian religion and the scriptures, they're teaching for doctrine the traditions of men. God has never said anything about any of that, and that's part of the problem, which goes back to again, if we understand about the origins of the Roman Church and everything, the Western Church, it was Constantine who was a conqueror that oversaw and directed the institution of the church in the first place. He was a conqueror. So his focus was on controlling people, controlling money, you know, so it was all about it from the very beginning.
Yes.
The church was set up as an instrument. The church was set up by men as an instrument of control. If we understand that, and I guess I was just born to be a rebel. I ain't never liked that kind of
gosh,
stuff.
yes, you
But
ditto on that one.
But Ainsworth is absolutely right. And as a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, one of the things that I do on a regular basis is help people uncover these things that are beneath their conscious awareness that's controlling them. They don't even realize it, but there are things, there are beliefs, there are presuppositions that everybody has. Everybody has. Everybody. Nobody.
I'm always arguing this in everything, is that when you look at a child, a newborn, that purity of light of who they are, everything that they possibly could be. You look at children at play, the creativity, the exploration, the ability to be so many people and characters as they step into that wonderment. And then we send them to school or to church, and that now you must conform. All that beautiful creativity, all that exploration now must be boxed and labeled and filed, and it must conform. No, we don't want any of that imagination. We don't want any of that creativity, not unless it follows these bylines. We're the ones that are destroying humanity by stifling ourselves and boxing ourselves through society's dictation, be it the home front, the media, religion, country's conformity. We have got to understand that child is a gift to us. And everything that child is going to bring into the world as an adult is only as good as we watered those seeds and let them grow in the light that they're meant to go in. God doesn't make mistakes.
No, God never said.
So why are we constantly trying to change?
God never said, oops.
No.
Well, can I interject here, Sara?
Yes, interject.
There is a British. I hope you can help me here. And that's one of the sad things that I'm not at my computer, because I could have easily checked it out. But there's a British. He's a pacifist, a social activist. He's also a professor, and he wrote in one of his books that one of the means by which the population is controlled is through education.
Yes.
And he actually referred to education as propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
This was either in the 18th century or early 19th century, 20th century, sorry. But he talked about the fact that eventually the aim of the educational system is to get to the point where you will not even need to have policemen, because people are going to be so controlled through the education, so become so passive that it would be impossible for them to rebel. He talked about, doing experiments where we tell them, for example, the kids that snow is black, and keep indoctrinating them until they get to believe that snow is black, even though they see it as white. Now, I said that because that has been one of the messages I've been trying to get through. And it just seems every time I do it, doesn't matter if it's a personal conversation or a group conversation or a social network post, it just goes straight over everybody's head, and you just think, because we've been so conditioned that education is important. And we don't realize that by that very education, we are being programmed. So what we actually think, many times we think, this is my own decision. I'm making my own mind up. I'm doing my own stuff. And not realizing that, no, you're not. You're basically operating on programming.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Ainsworth, and let me pick it. Coming back to you, Ainsworth, that being said, and this is where some of the languaging and the semantics, I think you and I both agree that knowledge is very important. So when you talk about education, and for me, it kind of clarified where you're going when you said educational system, because now we're talking about the control. But when we move in the pure knowledge of learning at the spiritual level,
Yes.
you basically have the same outcome. The educational system is a counterfeit for control.
Correct.
That will bring a counterfeit of what true knowledge will bring in that unitive spirit throughout humanity. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And as you say, stuff will just go. I call them my airplane sermons. Right over there.
Yes, exactly. Well, but I've mentioned this quite a few times, and I think probably every show we've done, Charles, and probably with Wainsworth as well, about the knowingness. And, and for me, it's, the gut instincts, when the gut says, well, I don't know why I know, I just know. I call that the divine knowledge that then resonates with the heart in truth, and then goes to the spirit in articulation, and the mind will know what it needs to know when it needs to know it. Now, knowledge is wonderful. It's in your database. It's right there, and it will be extracted when you need to know it. But so many people are on the knowledge for knowledge's sake, without the knowingness of what that knowledge means. And I think when you channel the divine energy and you allow that knowledge to come to you, you feel the knowledge to the thought that is needed to apply. And I think we need to get out of just the thinking, because that's where we paralyze ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have to ignite the heart, the soul, and the spirit into the conversation, because that's when we're getting the whole picture and we understand what knowledge we are in at that moment.
Exactly. That's what Gurdjieff talked about, the three centers, you know, the feeling center, the thinking center, and the heart center. When those are all in alignment and everything,
that's when you're in truth.
You can have knowledge, but knowledge without wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
So, and what I'm hearing you say, maybe languaged a little bit differently, is that knowingness, that's the wisdom part of being able to take this knowledge and apply it in such a way where there are no losers. We're brought up in a system that says there's got to be winners, and that means there's got to be losers.
Yes.
Ultimately, that's why. That does not have to be the case.
No.
There does not have to be.
That's another form of control, isn't it?
Exactly.
It definitely is, yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, when we talk about spirituality and religion, you know, we know that religion, you know, has, however way it started off, you know, as you said, kind of started off in the form of control anyway. It's also an institution, a very rich one. You know, you said in your last show about, you know, if people joining a church, they want to look at their bank account first and see how much money they got, where they can join. How godly that is, you know?
Yeah, right.
And we talked about the movie Come Sunday, which I recommend people to see, which is a guy that really had the God epiphany, and then the church turned against him because it wasn't following the Christianity of
my
Jesus.
friend Carlton Pearson.
Right, yes. And the thing is that we're at one point, and this is where I think the Age of Aquarius is definitely in play, Ainsworth, is that we've stepped out of that, you know, the chains of slavery to religion. And we were held as slaves because we'll be damned if we think we're going to hell. We'll be ostracized. You're ungodly. Well, God is me, is within me. I am doing God's work through me. And when and of course, the church doesn't want you to know that you have a divine connection.
No.
Right? Because they're going to lose out on their profit. You know, the money they're going to make from you every Sunday. But if church can come together and bring those souls together in unity, as a community, there to support and love one another, now I think you truly have what a church should be, in celebration of each other, our divine presence, and creating a symphony by us all coming together in the same song.
Yeah.
See, religion. Well, Charles, you wanted to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Religion, by its very nature, is designed to strip you of your power.
Yes.
And to give control, to surrender your power to another. So, you know, that's why you need an avatar. Because what the avatar does, whether that avatar is a prophet or the Messiah or some deity or whatever, that you surrender your power to, and you give offerings and you give sacrifices and you do rituals and all that kind of stuff to that avatar, because that avatar is what gives you blessings, what blesses you. Well, when we begin to understand that we are the Christ, we are the Atman, we are the Brahman, we are the Orisha, we are the Lao, we are God.
Yes.
The divine dwells in us, and we are the divine. We are one with the divine.
Yeah.
And we, you know, there is no other. Okay? Everything that appears as other is simply a reflection of the one within. Okay? Displaying itself based on the level of our consciousness at any given point in time. And so, you know, the Upanishad, I don't know if you know about the Upanishad, Charles, if you've read it.
Yes.
But one of the key verses for me, one of the things that really opened up my eyes was when the Upanishad said, the truly illumined Saiyan worships no deity, pay obeisance to no elders or ancestors, and bows before no one. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And when I read that, that was like an epiphany, because that's coming from Hinduism, where you have hundreds and thousands of deities. And yet they're telling you at the esoteric level, when you reach the point where you realize that there's nothing outside of yourself, nothing to bow down to, nothing to pay obeisance to, it's all within, then you've reached the state of enlightenment.
Yes.
Well, and even the parallel with Hinduism and Vedanta, you look at in Christianity, there's the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Trinity. In Hinduism is Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. You know, so yes, there are other divine beings, but those other divine beings, those other gods, that's us.
Yes.
And even
they are reflections of the one.
Exactly. And Jesus even said all of the things. See, this is what they don't like to talk about in the church, because Jesus said, the things that I have done, feeding the multitudes, healing the sick, raising the dead, he said, you're going to do the same thing and even greater works than these.
Yes.
But we don't want to talk about that.
No.
You know,
that's where I differ with you, Charles, because I don't think Jesus said it. I say the Christ says it.
Okay, well, okay, semantics. I hear you. I hear
different
you.
opinions. That's it, right? Different perspectives.
But there's no difference of opinion there. I'm flowing with it.
No, I'm just playing with you a little bit. That's okay.
and see, but this is a demonstration of how we do it. You know, so that we clarify the meanings that we carry, because that same Christ is within all of us.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You see, the concept of the Christ always existed.
Exactly.
Right? Even before the creation of the Jesus avatar, the Christ concept always existed, and it can be traced all the way back up to ancient Egypt. Where you move from the Christos, the Christus state to the Christos. I think that's how it goes. But you move into the Christ consciousness, like Paul talks about moving from the flesh into the spirit. And that's it. But getting back to what you were talking about there, Charles. If you go back to the New Testament, Jesus Christ said, "I am in the Father, and the Father is in me." He says, and when you become one with us, what we do is we come and we dwell in you, and you are in us.
Yes, I am the vine. You are the branch.
Sounds pretty much like you're one with the God.
Right.
Exactly.
And that is what oneness is and wholeness is,
exactly.
right? Yeah, exactly.
And when we lose a lot of stuff, even in the translation, because even the New Testament is a translation from Aramaic into Greek. So there's stuff that's lost there. The understanding of words like perichoresis, which is this flowing into one another. There's so much that does kind of get borrowing from a title of a movie, lost in translation.
Yes.
But this is the whole thing. These are the types of things that, particularly coming up in religion classes in school, they didn't want to talk about that. When I ask questions about those types of things and to seek for a deeper understanding, because I know what I was seeing in the English. No, don't. Now you're going to send me to seminary, and I'm going to get a formal education and get into the original languages and start to look. And when we understand that these are translations, things do get lost in translation. Actually, the whole concept of Savior is non-existent in Hebrew thought. Jesus was not Savior. He was life giver. He was Ihidaya in the Aramaic, so giver of life, which we have ended up translating because, again, that control and that fear factor, I have to have someone to save me.
You're right.
Well,
now, I'm going to pause.
If you understand it, sorry.
Go ahead, Ainsworth, and then I'm going to jump in.
Okay, if you understand what the Christ is, you talk about the life giver. Well, that's what it is. When you attain Christ consciousness,
Exactly.
you've gotten life.
Yes, exactly.
Now,
And
gentlemen,
that's going back to what you were saying. I am in you.
right. We are
Yeah,
we are it.
yeah.
We are is, right? You know, and that's the thing.
Before Abraham was, I am.
Yeah, yes. And actually, there's a little bit I'm going to end off the show with, because we're going to do a part 2 here.
Okay.
I actually, in the part 2, would like you to go back into referring to the older scriptures and everything else. Let's dive more into that and give people more examples, because I think that both of you will most certainly enlighten a lot of people with that information. So there's a part 2 coming up on this show for sure, folks. But actually, it was very interesting. I interviewed a Karen Noe yesterday, who actually channels Wayne Dyer, and he was always about stepping into I am. And he says now that he is ascended, he now understands it's about the we are.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is this: we have to step into our I am first before we can join the orchestra of we are, because we have to perfect our own instrument. And when we've got that instrument that we really truly understand what it is and it can contribute to the orchestra, that is the we are, and now we create a symphony. So we're going to do symphony in part 2, and there's going to be a show coming up next week, folks, because this is too big a subject, and there's so much for you to talk about. So in the second half, we'll dive more into those scriptures and how the lost meanings are and what the real truth is, because yes, it has got lost in translation, and it became an industry, became a corporation.
Yeah.
So in the last couple of minutes that we have here, folks, quickly give me your sites, so people are listening to part 1, and then they can get all the other information in part 2. We've got 1 minute. So Charles, what's your site for people to find you?
Okay, I'm at www.victoriousliving.com for the coaching stuff that I do. My church is All Saints Olmsted Falls.us. Yeah, that's me.
And Ainsworth?
Okay, my website is right now under construction, so it's practically down. But I have a couple books that are available on Amazon. Christ the Serpent is one of them. Ancient African Mystery System. That's one, and the other one is the book on self-love. The title is not coming to me right now.
I've got it here. It's all on the posting, folks, and you just put in
Right.
either of their names and you'll get everything here. And of course, all you have to do is put their names in here in selfdiscovery.com, and you'll see all the shows they've done with us, and all their information is there. I'm going to end this show. Come back for part 2. We're just getting going. This is getting juicy, and we're going to hit part 2 with understanding more of those scriptures, where it went wrong, and why we so misconstrued it, and was it just purely the finances of keeping people in control as profitable that led the church, and how do we actually embrace the Aquarian liberty right now of stepping into our own Christ, our own God presence. So until next time, folks, thank you, gentlemen. Part 2 is coming up. For more wonderful shows like this, please go to selfdiscoveryradio.com, podcasts, and see our lineup. And if you wish to support us, we have a funded button. Please stay tuned for our next show.